right. Welcome. I want to, Delegate Lord Charkoudian, I'm the House Chair, House Co-Chair of this Oversight Committee with Senator Katie Fry-Hester. I want to welcome you back, and we have some really important issues that we're going to cover today, and really appreciate all the agencies taking the time to prepare for this conversation. And look forward to the conversation. We also appreciate AFSCME coming to also share their perspective on these issues. And I do want to sort of both apologize and add an extra thank you for doing this and making it happen today. Just for the record, I think everyone in this room knows we've been trying to schedule this meeting for a very long time, finally had it scheduled on the 17th, which ended up being the day of our special session. And so this was sort of the last possible date that we could get it in before session starts. And so I know this is a very busy time for everyone given that. It's part of why our relatively small committee is even smaller today. But it is a conversation that's important to have on the record and to be able to come back to. And we know there are people who are watching, have communicated with us, are concerned about these issues and watching on our live stream. And so thank you again to everyone for preparing, and look forward to this conversation.
Thank you all. I echo the words of Delegate Charkoudian. For the record, I'm Senator Katie Fry-Hester and the Senate Chair of this committee. We heard this morning from the Department of Budget Management. We were talking about overtime and service contracts, and we'll build on that today. We're concerned about, the General Assembly broadly is concerned about workforce shortages, hiring challenges, and staffing standards in critical areas of state government. There are agencies where vacancy and staffing ratios have real day-to-day consequences for worker safety, public safety, and compliance with the law. We also will be looking forward to understanding how recently enacted policies, such as heat standards and the David Martinez Act, are being implemented for state workers, and whether agencies have the staffing and resources needed to meet these obligations. We really look forward to partnering with the agencies to figuring out how we can address some of these challenges in the session going forward, and we appreciate our agencies and labor representatives being here and look forward to hearing from you today. So with that, I think first up is the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. Please come to the table. Thanks. Secretary, whenever you're ready, introduce yourself and those speaking with you today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Hester, Chair Charkoudian, and members of the Fair Practices and State Personnel Oversight Committee. For the record, my name is Carolyn J. Scruggs, and I am the Secretary of the Maryland Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. With me today are Toyin Beckware, our Acting Deputy Secretary of Administration, and Yemi Oyemade, who is our Acting Chief Human Resources Officer. It is a pleasure to be here before you today to provide an update on the hiring and staffing within our department. I would like to begin by recognizing the great work that our staff do within that department. These individuals do incredible work every single day. In 2023, when I assumed the leadership of the Maryland Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services, the agency vacancy rate was 17%. Reflecting long-standing workforce challenges. Through targeted recruitment, streamlined hiring processes, and strengthened workforce retention, the vacancy rate has been reduced to 8.42%. This represents the lowest vacancy rate achieved by DPSCS in the past 7 years and demonstrates measurable progress in stabilizing the workforce while maintaining public safety operations. In 2025, we have hired more correctional officers than in any other year in the last decade. The following overview outlines the strategic actions and policy-driven initiatives that has produced these results. The department's hiring performance continues to outpace total separations, continuing a positive trend in quarterly hires, which has enabled us to maintain a vacancy rate below the budgeted turnover rate of 12%. From the beginning of 2023 through December of 2025, the department has greatly improved its overall vacancy from 17% to 8.42%. The vacancy rate for correctional officers has improved from 9.45% to 8.33%. Parole and probation agents have seen even greater progress, improving from 11.8% to 6.37%. We continue to sustain strong hiring momentum and a healthy candidate pipeline. 2025 was a banner year, delivering record hiring performance and year-over-year staffing growth, particularly on our front line with correctional officers through major roles. Driven by process streaming and centralized oversight, background clearance times decreased by 75%, which is strengthening our candidate flow into all of our academies. With improved manpower efficiencies in the background investigation unit, overall completions increased by 68% compared to 2023. Coupled with accelerating hiring and academy alignment, we continue to see a steady decline in our vacancies. Alongside hiring, we've improved onboarding and candidate engagement practices to help ensure new hires are supported and retained. The enhanced outreach, targeted regional messaging, and post-event support help maintain pipeline stability and move candidates through this hiring process. As a result of these hiring improvements, the department averaged 92 monthly hires, over a half of which were correctional officers. We had a strong October surge due in part to the hiring success earlier in the year, coupled with 3 academies, and the drive to onboard new employees prior to the holiday season. As you can see, the month of October was not only our best month, but was actually a record-breaking month with 131 employees hired. That included 99 correctional officers. These hiring outcomes align with the department's FY26 overtime reduction plan, which prioritizes filling critical operational vacancies to sustain reduced overtime expenditures. 2025 was the department's strongest hiring year for performance in 3 years. To date, the department has had over 1,100 new hires, which includes 684 correctional officers. Total hires are up 52% and 75% in correctional officer hires. That's compared to 2024. With the success that we had in 2025 and continuous internal adjustments made in recruiting and background, we expect sustained hiring success in 2026. We are already off to a great start in 2026, with 42 correctional officers hired since January 8th. This is in comparison to the 57 correctional officers that were hired the month of January for 2025. A breakdown of the total hires is provided on this slide. As you can see, 61.4% for correctional officer ones. Moving into 2026, our strategy centers on community-based recruiting, streamlining clearance processes, enhancing candidate support, and prioritizing in-person interviews. This keeps our pipeline strong and ensures academy readiness in 2026. Throughout the year, we continue to carry out targeted recruitment efforts aimed at mandated and hard-to-fill roles, such as correctional officers, correctional maintenance officers, social workers, and psychologists. The department is aggressively expanding hiring campaigns with a strong emphasis on the east and western regions of this state. Throughout 2025, the department engaged with over 3,500 prospective candidates, resulting in over 1,400 applications. The chart provides a breakdown of the number of applications received based on engagement through virtual and in-person interviews, job fairs, and hiring events. Job fairs were the largest recruitment source, attracting over 2,000 candidates. On-site engagement allowed the department to interview candidates and process on the spot with conditional offers issued the same day to reduce delays and increase applicant retention. DPSCS has hosted 131 recruitment events statewide in 2025. 85 of them were done between July and September. This includes 20 same-day hiring events concentrated in Hagerstown, Cumberland, and Maryland's Eastern Shore. A region-focused recruitment campaign targeting the East and West regions has executed through billboards, radio, digital ads, and video outreach. Messaging highlights our diverse workforce and local representation to drive stronger engagement and applicant volume in priority areas. The department also conducts outreach through Indeed hiring campaigns, DBM targeted email pushes, social media campaigns using Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. The Retention and Longevity Pay Incentive Program was enacted in December of 2019. Correctional officers who met 20 years of service and were eligible to retire could participate in this program. Eligible employees were able to sign a 4-year contract that offered a payment of $7,500 within 30 days of signing up. Another $7,500 after 2 years in the program, and an additional $22,500 at the conclusion of their 4-year contract. Nearly $6 million was paid out in RLPI payments to correctional officers in 2025. This incentive program concluded at the end of FY25. New correctional officer hires continue to receive the structured $5,000 signing-on bonus. That bonus is split between the post-academy graduation and successful completion of probation. Regional incentives of $2,500 were also provided to officers assigned to high-need locations such as the East and the West, Cumberland, Hagerstown, Maryland's Eastern Shore. These incentives were paid in 2 monthly installments of $1,250 at the same intervals as the hiring bonus. Nearly $2 million was paid out in new hire bonuses in 2025. Eligible DPSCS employees also received $500 referral bonuses for successfully recruiting correctional officers. Additionally, military veterans may qualify for up to 5 years of state service credit towards early retirement. Following 1 year of service and successful completion of the initial probationary period, employees are promoted to Correctional Officer 2 with a 6% salary increase. This streamlined promotional process also applies to parole and probation agent 1 positions. These financial and service-based benefits reflect a deliberate strategy to position public safety work as a competitive, stable, long-term civil service career. As part of the department's strategic focus on retention, career development, and vacancy management, the Human Resources Division effectuated 485 promotions for correctional series employees. Timely promotion management helps support new hiring by maintaining supervisory staffing to provide guidance and oversight within our facilities, and continually make available entry-level positions for hiring, which the recruitment division stands ready to fill. The chart you now see on the next 2 slides provides an overview of the number of vacancies and where they are within the department. As of December 31st, the overall vacancy rate, again, is 8.42%. Alongside progress and success made in reducing vacancy rates, The department continues to maintain national standards in staffing as audited by the American Correctional Association. As a member of the American Correctional Association, which is the national authority for correctional policy and standards, the ACA functions as a management tool for over 1,300 correctional agencies in the United States and internationally. ACA performance-based standards and expected practices address services, programs, operations essential to effective correctional management and reflect best practices and current relevant policies and procedures. The standards developed by the ACA are the foundation of the accreditation process. Accreditation is intended to improve facility operations through adherence to clear standards relevant to all areas of operation within a facility, including safety, security, order, incarcerated individual care, programs, justice, and administration. I am happy to report that we have 9 correctional facilities in Maryland and the Maryland Correctional Enterprise, which have received ACA accreditation. This means we have met requirements for all applicable mandatory standards and at least 90% of applicable non-mandatory standards. ACA performance standards for correctional staffing acknowledges that a one-size-fits-all ratio cannot account for differences in physical plant layout, custody levels, or specialized program needs. To meet ACA accreditation standards, a facility must conduct a formal analysis that considers the following factors: physical plant, individual classification activities, and safety and security. In line with the ACA, the department conducts annual reviews of facility staffing plans that assess post-by-post needs, and they consider the factors that were previously mentioned. As the department continues to align its facilities with national best practices, DPSCS has engaged with Creative Corrections to conduct the required biannual comprehensive staffing analysis. This analysis will identify optimal post-coverage levels, accounts for facility-specific operational demands, and quantifies the staffing levels required within our facilities. The staffing analysis for 2025 was conducted in coordination with the union, and its results are currently under review by the department. In conclusion, I am very proud of the progress we have made in 2025 in this hiring effort, and we are ensuring the safety and security of our staff as well as our incarcerated individuals under our care. And I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. Here we go. Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. I just want to start by congratulating you on the very first slide, which shows the reduction in the vacancy rates from 15.3% down to 8.4%. So you've obviously had a steady trajectory over the course of the past year. So
thank you.
Well done. Obviously, there's still further to go. We heard this morning from the Department of Budget Management about the overtime costs and also the workers' comp claims. And I think that was particularly concerning. And one of the things we're going back and forth about was, if we get more of these vacancies filled, will the workers' comp claims decrease? I think it was something like 11% for DPSCS. I was curious what are your continued plans to continue filling the vacancies? Is it, do you need any, and what do you need from the legislature to move forward?
So we are already, as I shared in our presentation, we are already below the 12%. So we are definitely tapping into our vacancy rate below that we have been budgeted by Department of Budget and Management. And look, I have my finance director with me as well. And looking at that, we need to ensure that we are able to have monies to fill those pens that typically we were not allowed to fill, because that's something that we are continuously doing, using those pens. I will say that while a disadvantage to the department as far as space, the advantage that we just gained was that us having to depopulate the Maryland Reception and Diagnostic Center, we gained about 262 pins from that, and we were able to take those individuals and keep them right on that same corridor and place them into other facilities. So over the last 4 weeks, we are seeing our overtime go down. It will also affect definitely any of our workman comps claim because we have more staff now that are available and readily available. But I will also ask you to be mindful that the population that we deal with now is a lot more aggressive. So some of those claims may be because of encounters with them, some of them may not.
Thank you for that. And just to clarify, so I understand that you're repurposing pins, but should we expect that your budget this year will request more funding for more pins?
Request for more funding for more pins?
Yes, to fill the vacancies.
Do you have the money in the budget for it?
We don't have the funding because, the turnover is budgeted at the rate that it is budgeted at. So if we get more pins, are you asking that if we get more pins, we will be able to reduce our vacancy rates?
Thought the secretary said something about more pins. So if you need more pins, have you requested them, I think is my question.
So what I said was, so with the 12% where we are, if we start to utilize that vacancy rate that we've always been required to maintain, the question is, do we have the funding in order to support those pins that are there? That's what
Not
she's
at this
asking.
time, not in FY 2026, no.
Okay, so you were required to maintain a vacancy rate? Could you say more about that?
The turnover, just the 12%.
12%, our budgeted turnover is 12%. So that's what DBM budgeted us at. However, we are at our vacancy rate is currently at 8.42%. So that means that there is a variance between what we're budgeted at, funded for, versus our actual vacancy rate. So that is why, so there's a variance there, and we have to be to account for that variance.
So you're not required to have 12% vacant positions. It's just that's what you're budgeted for based on prior experience.
But that's what we're budgeted for, so that is what we have the funding for.
That's the amount that they give us up to funding for.
Yes.
So this is the first time that we've typically gone below that variance because other administrations and previously it has stayed where that variance was and not gone below.
Below that.
I just want to make sure I understand. So the budget that you receive assumes that you're going to have a vacancy rate of 12%?
Correct. So we're budgeted at that level.
Okay, I wish we had DBM back here this afternoon to have that conversation, because that does seem to fly in the face of what it is that you need.
So does that prevent you from so now that your vacancy rate is 8%, do you have the money to pay the people? No.
So from my perspective, I think from all of our perspectives here, I suspect from yours as well, we would want a vacancy rate that's close to zero, right?
Absolutely.
But it sounds like you've moved in the direction of decreasing the vacancy rate substantially, which is, I think, what we all want. And when we look at the safety data, when we look at workers' comp, that's clearly what's needed. But and it sounds like you're planning to continue to move towards filling the vacancies. And I'm concerned that maybe the budget doesn't support you to do that.
We'll have a deficiency.
At this point, I mean, that's where we're saying that there is a variance between what we're budgeted for and where we are.
Okay, well, I think that's a conversation we need to have with our budget folks and, yeah, well, that's something I think we'll want to look into further. So thank you for that.
I had a couple more follow-up questions on something that you mentioned. You mentioned closing the Maryland Reception Diagnostic and Classification Center. And I was just curious if you could talk about what steps the department took to ensure the staff were prepared for the transition, and when the incarcerated individuals were accepted at new facilities, how were the staff supported there? Yeah.
Sure, thank you. Thank you for that question. So when I received a report that was created by CGL Corporation, actually, and it outlined deficiencies at what we call MRDCC, Maryland Reception Diagnostic Center. When I received the report, it was very alarming to me, and I sent it to my Attorney General for review. And the Attorney General also felt that it was very alarming and felt that at this point that facility possessed a life safety issue and that I should depopulate that facility. At that time, within a day of receiving that notification from the AG's office, I did notify the governor's office that I was going to begin depopulation. And we set up command center at what we call the O'Brien House downtown in the pretrial division, and we began to assess via case management some 600 incarcerated individuals to see if there were any need to keep them separated because of alerts, because of gang affiliation, what their medical needs were. We did a full case management risk assessment on each one of them. After we did that, we were able to then first fill the facilities within the Division of Pretrial Detention and Services because we had vacancies at the Maryland Transition Center. So the goal was to keep those individuals close to Baltimore City because that's where they have to go to court. Because we do not have a lot of restricted housing in that area, unfortunately, we had to use housing in the Jessup region to house anyone that was on restrictive housing. So there were a few individuals that were sent to Jessup Correctional Institute. And our women, we had no other choice but to utilize a wing at MCIW in Jessup because that is the only other location where we have women. So they have been strategically placed based on a new risk assessment and evaluation, and it was a coordinated effort amongst the jails there in the facility, the staff in that facility, and everybody that would normally touch someone doing intake or transfer. We made sure we went through that process. It took us approximately 2 days to get that done, 24/7 operation. With the staff, what we did was we have a portal where staff can sign up so that they request a transfer to other facilities. The first thing that we had the staff had the administration there do was look at who had a request for transfer and honor those requests. After honoring those requests, the goal was to then now fill the vacancies at those facilities within that Baltimore region. And that's what we did. We started filling those vacancies within the Baltimore region. I believe now we're down to about 57 that we have left. That we did not have a pin to place them in, and I know that my acting director for human resources is working now alongside our administration team down there to see where we're going to place them because there are some facilities, and I'll give you an example, central booking. We get a lot of medical runs out of central booking. So there is a need to add additional staff there because of the transports that go back and forth so much. But we also have to look to make sure that the staff we add are weapons qualified because they're going outside of facility. So we are strategically placing them. So the goal is to honor the request, definitely, of any of the staff as we can accommodate them. But COMAR does allow us to transfer an individual staff member within a 50-mile radius as long as we give them a 14-day notice. They are typically being assigned from one corner of the block to the other. So, you know, it is less than 50-mile radius.
When the individual transfer were the staff at that new facility, were they prepared in any way to assume the influx of new individuals?
Absolutely. Many of them were happy to receive them. Those wardens, AWs, and chiefs of staff were prepared to include them into what we call their post-assignment worksheet. There is a worksheet that they do daily that allows them to facilitate what posts an individual will be working on per shift. So it allowed them to include them now into that. And that's how we were able to reduce overtime because then now you have this additional staff on these teams. So the drafting was reduced or the need for voluntary overtime was reduced because of the influx of the new staff that were coming in.
No, I'm sorry. I was talking about the incarcerated population.
Oh, I'm sorry.
When they were moved to the new facilities, was there enough staff at the new facility to absorb those incarcerated?
Yes, because when we moved them to a new facility, we did not exceed the population for the housing unit that was already there. So the staff that were there were already managing that housing unit. So say you had a housing unit, what we call a 192 building. You may have only had 90 individuals there. So we were able to add the other 100 to that individual, and you had the staff that would manage those posts.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. And then I'm assuming that because there was no public hearing or kind of notice prior to the closure of the facility, that it was deemed an emergency?
It was deemed an emergency by the Attorney General. There is a public hearing.
There was a public hearing,
There is one scheduled, I believe.
but it's already closed, or not?
No, it's not closed, it's depopulated right now. And the big difference, because we're working with Department of General Services to determine whether or not that building will be reopened, whether it's cost efficient to even reopen it and fix it, or whether we're gonna have to make some other choices. So they are doing a full assessment of that evaluation, Department of General Services, and we'll be guided by what they tell us.
And the conditions that were the point of the, were the reason for the closure, how long were those known before it was depopulated?
Thank you for asking that as well. I will, and to be totally honest with you, I will tell you that in 2017, I believe I was the warden there. And during that time, the facade of the building was falling. I did put in a request to have the facade of the building repaired, and it was denied back then. And unfortunately, it is, I hate to say, in my 33 years, it's typical public safety. We oftentimes are the last ones to get money and get need, the things that we need. And they fail to realize that, my staff, first and foremost, deserve to work in conditions that are good, like everyone else. So that building probably has started to deteriorate, at least since I knew when I was warden there. Based on the report, it had gotten to a point where even beyond the facade, it was now the water coming through the brick and mortar. So.
Are you able to
not
share the
safe.
report with us?
I believe if we can share it, I'll make sure legal will ask legal, and we're happy to share it if we can. Yep.
Thank you very much. Ask about this.
Yeah. I wanted to ask one other question, but I guess I'm just, while we're on this topic of the physical plants, are there others that right now you think need attention that aren't getting the kind of attention that are gonna sort of lead to the crisis level that now we're facing with that? And what are the steps to address that?
Thank you for that question. There are others that definitely need care. There are a lot of maintenance needs and preventive maintenance needs that have not been funded within Maryland Department of Public Safety. Right now, we are working very closely with Department of General Services. They are conducting an audit of every one of our buildings to determine physical plant needs, any structural deficiencies. Are there any to the magnitude of MRDCC? I do not believe that there are any to the magnitude where we need to totally depopulate, but there are definitely buildings that need to be, physical plant needs to be restored, without a doubt.
When is the audit gonna be done?
They've already started.
Do you know when it's gonna be completed by?
I do not, because they're going to each facility. So they have 13 facilities that they need
So
to
probably
to
not
do.
before we're doing a capital budget.
I'm not going to say, because they've been moving pretty well.
Okay.
But let me find out.
Would you mind letting us know? Yeah.
Let me speak with Secretary Chaudry and his team, and I will find out when they anticipate to complete those audits and certainly let you know.
Yeah, I think the hope would be that we would be able to do something in the legislative session about, the issues that are coming up that have significant health safety issues.
Great.
I did want to ask about one other thing, which is the vendor Centurion. What service do they provide?
So they are both our medical and mental health provider now.
Okay, and then we've heard reports that they have fought unionization. Do you know anything about that? Are you familiar with that concern?
So when they came to us with that, we cannot get involved in their unionization. We were basically guided again by our attorneys. That is between Centurion and the union, because they're not our employee, they're our contractor. So that would be between them and the union.
Are there ever, do you know if there's ever, I know in the private sector, there's like labor peace agreements that, when we're looking at policies and we'll say like, there's got to be, in order to get this sort of a contract with the state or this, whatever it might be, that there's a need to sign a labor peace agreement.
That's not in their current contract with us.
That's not in the
It's
contract.
not in the current contract with us.
With Centurion.
Correct.
And do you know what it might take to set something like that up? Like, are you saying that the AG is advising you can't do that, or is
I'm sure
that?
that it would probably be a renegotiation of their contract. I'm not sure, there are not any costs associated with it, so I'm not sure they would have to go back before the board. But that's definitely something that our AG and our procurement would have to look at, because it's an amendment to it would be an amendment to the contract.
Do you mind there's a few things I think that y'all will be following up with us in terms of information. Can you just find out what that process might be?
Yes.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions? I don't think I have any questions. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you all taking the time, the preparation, the progress on hiring, and look forward to the follow-up and hope that we can do some advocacy within the budget process to continue to address some of these gaps that remain.
Thank you so much, and we
Yep.
appreciate any assistance you could provide us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Great. So we'd like to move on to the next part of our agenda today, which is the Department of Juvenile Services. Please feel free to come up to the table. We'll be hearing today from Acting Secretary Betsy Fox Tolentino and Deputy Secretary of Support Services Tiffany Johnson. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Good afternoon. Let me just get everything. Settled here. All right. Good afternoon. I'm Betsy Fox Tolentino. I'm the Acting Secretary at the Department of Juvenile Services. And thank you for having us, and thank you for the opportunity to be here with you. It's my first opportunity to sit in front of a committee since my appointment about 6 months ago, and I'm incredibly honored to lead the department at such a critical time. And when I was asked to take this role by the governor, I said, this is a dream job for me, and 6 months later, it still is. So I'm very happy to be here. Over the past 20 years, I've worked in and around Maryland's Department of Juvenile Services and juvenile system. And I've spent nearly my entire career here in Maryland and worked with some national organizations over the past 3 years. I began my career as an attorney at Legal Aid. I was an attorney at the Office of the Public Defender, where I handled juvenile cases in Baltimore City and did some other things over there for about 8 years. And then I went to the Department of Juvenile Services, where I started as the legislative director, but left as Deputy Secretary of Community Operations about 3 years ago. For the past 3 years, I worked at the Roca Impact Institute, where I worked with as a national consultant, helping different probation agencies, residential facilities, community-based organizations do the work different and help young people build skills and help staff build skills to feel more equipped in their service to young people. So when I returned to the Department of Juvenile Services, I returned with a clear focus on supporting and strengthening our frontline workforce. Our frontline staff must be equipped with the right tools to achieve better outcomes for our young people. DJS is a staffing-intensive public safety agency. 86% of our staff work directly with our young people, whether it's in the community or in our residential facilities. I'm deeply grateful for our staff who show up every day to do this important and challenging work. And I know they choose this work because they share in our agency's commitment to the young people we serve. So let's jump in to a little bit about what we do. So as I mentioned, we're a staffing intensive agency. Most of our staff are directly serving young people each day. And we operate 4 sort of distinct 24-hour 7-day-a-week systems in our agency. The first one is intake. And the intakes portion of our work focuses on evaluating, screening, and assessing young people when law enforcement bring them to our attention. And we also make detention decisions. We do that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Our next core system that operates all the time is community detention. And that's where we supervise young people in the community as an alternative to incarceration, often through electronic monitoring. We then have our detention facilities, which operate, again, every single day, all the time. And that's where we hold our young people who have been court ordered to be incarcerated while awaiting their trials or their adjudications. And then lastly, we operate 4 residential treatment facilities around the state focused on supporting our young people, helping them build the skills to change behaviors and return to the communities on a pathway to success. So this is an overview of our staffing. The majority of our staff work in residential services. These are, again, the 24-hour facilities serving our youth in pretrial detention, our youth who are adjudicated delinquent and receiving treatment, and our residential staff roles include residential advisors. They're the ones providing the day-to-day supervision, structure, and support for our young people. We have behavioral and somatic health staff who are delivering mental health, behavioral health, substance use, and medical services to meet our kids' acute and treatment needs. We have supervisors and superintendents who help manage the day-to-day supervision of our facilities. And then we also have an educational program. Our juvenile services education program provides young people 6 hours of school every day, every school day. The other core part of our operation is overseeing youth in the community. You'll see that's the next sort of big bucket of staff on the chart. And they are providing the probation services, the connections to community-based organizations. They are providing the day-to-day overall support of our young people when they're being served in community. And then we have intake staff who provide that assessment and supervision when we have young people coming into our system at the very front door. We are able to do diversion, but only for a small number of young people. Most of our complaints that we receive from law enforcement must be forwarded to the state's attorney. We have to forward all felonies, all handgun violation matters, and all misdemeanors when a young person is already on supervision. Our community staff roles are that intake staff, our community detention workers, and our community case managers, which provide those probation services. Now flipping to our hiring trends and vacancy. Reducing vacancies across the agency has been one of my top operational priorities. Staffing stability is critical. It's critical to the continuity of care for our young people and allowing us to be an effective public safety operation. I'm pleased to report that DJS has made significant progress in reducing overall vacancies, but we still have work to do, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Our agency-wide vacancy rate for all staff has declined from 15% in fiscal year 2023 to 11.4% year to date. The most significant improvement has been in our frontline direct care workforce, where our residential advisor vacancy rate has reduced from 15.6% in fiscal year 2023 to 10.8%, while adding 43 additional positions to our residential frontline workforce. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. As much as we want to make sure we are hiring and we are filling those vacancies, we also have to look at our retention rate. Are we doing the things to be able to help our staff stay in the job, feel equipped to do the work? And reducing and increasing our retention rate has been another priority. Retaining experienced staff is just as important as bringing them on. And I'm encouraged to report that staff retention is improving across the agency from fiscal year 2024 to 2025. All DJS residential facilities experienced increased retention rates. This means more experienced staff on the floor, greater consistency for our young people, and improved safety and stability in our facilities. We are also seeing those positive trends in our community-based workforce, and from fiscal year 2024 to fiscal year 2025, all DJS community offices saw improved staff retention. Again, improved retention in the community improves our supervision, It reduces that caseload disruption, moving one person to one case manager to another, and improves that continuity of services for our young people and their families. While we know there's more work to do, these trends are a signal that we are having the impact we want to see, and we are moving in the right direction. So as I mentioned, we're not where we want to be in filling our vacancies. We need to improve our hiring practices so that we reduce those vacancies, we get more staff on the floor and dedicated to our facilities and community offices to serve our young people. And what we are doing is we are instituting a weekly process where we are going to look at our data. We are going to look at our strategies. We are going to see where the backlogs are happening, where we're getting stuck, and what we need to do to build efficiencies in our hiring system so that we are getting better at filling those vacancies in a faster way. We've also hosted 3 DJS on-site hiring events in conjunction with our recruitment team. We participated in Career Center roundtables and community college events, and we partnered with labor and veterans groups to promote job opportunities and to increase awareness about what you can do here at the Department of Juvenile Services. We are really focused on expanding our bench so that we have staff ready to take positions when they become open, and we want to make sure that we are creating efficiencies, not just in like our internal processes, but what can we do to allow our candidates to complete portions of their hiring process in advance to interviewing. And we are reinvesting into our facilities. On the first day I took this job, I went to one of our facilities in Western Maryland, and what I saw when I got there was completely unacceptable. It was 11 o'clock in the morning. Our youth were still in their rooms because there was not enough staff there to be able to let them out of their rooms. My superintendent had been there for 30 hours. I knew right then we had to act with urgency and purpose to change the trend so that our facilities had what they need, that our frontline staff felt safe and secure in our facilities and were equipped to be able to get our young people what they need. So what we did is we did a very sort of in-depth review of our staffing around the agency. And that review had found that over the past 2.5 years, nearly 50 positions that were dedicated to our residential programs were moved from those residential programs and put other places in the agency while our population increased 22%. So we switched that around. We looked at every place in our agency to build efficiencies, evaluate our vacant positions. We reclassified and returned nearly all those positions to our facility operations. And these changes are already relieving some pressure for our frontline staff in the facilities, improves staffing we know, enhances what we are able to do to serve our young people. So how we staff our facilities is we use federal standards to determine what our staffing ratios should be. So we use the PREA staffing guidelines, that's a Prison Rape Elimination Act, which guides us to have 1 to 8 staff during waking hours and 1 to 16 during sleeping hours. We monitor to make sure we're maintaining these staffing ratios, that we are in compliance, and we are strengthening our frontline capacity by making sure that we are really forwarding those vacancy and retention strategies so that we don't get into a place where we create instability. Our other focus has really been breaking the cycle of overtime. I came in, and as much as I saw some concerns in just our staffing on the front lines, we also identified that there was an excessive use of overtime, and we could do some things to make that better. And since July 2025, our overtime utilization has decreased by a little over 17%. So how did we do that? We dug in and we started meeting every single week. Now we're meeting every other week because we're making progress, but we had to have these meetings frequently to look at where we could build efficiencies. And what we did is we automated the process so that when there needs to be a utilization of overtime, it's an easy process to put it in a sort of computer program, for lack of better words, where the supervisor can approve it, and then we can evaluate that utilization of overtime, and we can see where, hey, was there a scheduling thing that we could have shifted to do something better? We are investing into our frontline staff by helping bring more training to our frontline staff and making sure that they have what they need to be able to support our young people. We are providing additional coaching and support so that each day there's an opportunity to support the work that they're doing, and we're supporting the culture change. And part of that is these reductions in overtime, allowing for a better work-family balance. So in conclusion, the Department of Juvenile Services, like I said, is a 24/7 very staff-intensive agency. We are reinvesting. We are making the changes we need to have an improvement to support our frontline workforce and ensure that what we are doing at the end of the day helps us generate the outcomes that we want to see for our young people and for public safety. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for that overview. I want to start off by thanking you for your enthusiasm and your hard work. I mean, it's very, it's nice to see the reduction in the vacancy rates, the increase in the retention rates, and the decrease of the 17.2% in overtime. So in just a year, all that is good news. We did hear this morning that the workers' comp claims in DJS were almost 30% of staff, which I said I was appalled at. And you know, curious what you're doing to reduce those. But assuming that increasing residential staff is part of that, curious what steps you are taking to increase residential staff, and also whether or not you are currently engaged with the union on a staffing analysis for personnel more broadly.
So just a few things. You know, it was also another issue I identified like day one is that we had a considerable amount of our staff out on accident leave. And it's like this vicious cycle. You don't have enough staff in the facility, issues pop up, more situations, kids aren't getting what they need, they act out, staff get hurt, and then I have less staff in the facility, and we're just cycling. So we are focused on disrupting that cycle by finding those 50 positions that we were able to return to the facilities, reducing overtime, but we've also met with IWIF to move existing cases forward more efficiently. We've established a tracking system to monitor claims, establish injury codes, ensure deadlines are met, and to close cases in a timely manner. And since July 2025, there's been a 10% decrease in the amount of IWIF claims. So we're on the right path. We still have more work to do.
Great. And so the second part of that question was, what steps are you taking to increase residential staff?
So we did the analysis right after when I started to bring more staff in. And so we are still in the process of hiring those staff people to relieve the pressure in our facilities. We also are improving our hiring practices. So we need to get better at filling the vacancies we have. And so that's where our main focus has been.
So do you need anything from the General Assembly with regards to those vacancies that you are trying to fill?
I definitely think I'm going to have some ask and requests for some support. We are in the very beginning stages of working together to refine those hiring practices. I think there's probably some efficiencies that we can identify, and we will let you know if we think there's some support that you all can provide.
Okay, and then lastly, has the agency engaged with the union to conduct any of the staffing analysis work?
So I meet when we have our union meetings, I go, which I think has been a change over the past 3 years. I want to hear directly from our frontline staff, and we are taking into consideration what they tell us. We have not done a formal staffing analysis and coordination, but as we get deeper into the work, we'll make sure that they have their opportunity to have a voice heard and to be part of our team. We brought in and are intending, as we review all our policies and procedures, to do this together with our union partners and have frontline staff at the table informing how we do the work.
So can I interpret that if you are doing a staffing and analysis that you will work with the unions? Is that a yes?
We will definitely create opportunities for feedback, absolutely.
Okay, okay. I had a couple other questions. Do you want to jump in, or can I keep going?
You keep going.
Okay, so I've heard that the department is in desperate need of a master facilities plan that takes into account full capital and operational needs. How is that? Do you agree with that? Are you thinking about it? And would you work with your union partners on that?
Yeah, so we actually just submitted an addendum to our facilities master plan. So we made some changes. It was definitely a need that I identified really early on. And we submitted that just probably about a week ago, January 6th.
And so was there any union input into that addendum to the master plan?
We did not actively seek out feedback on the addendum. We can make sure there's a chance to review it, and we're happy to hear.
Okay, thank you. And last but not least, it's my understanding that juvenile services facilities are contracting out food vendors and behavioral health providers. And are there any plans to bring these services back in-house so that you can receive more efficient or quality services?
I really want to bring as much as we can back in-house. I think we get better outcomes for our young people when we have a real sort of coordinated team working together day in and day out. We've had to use contracts to fill critical gaps. I think as we improve our hiring practices and improve how we are operating as an agency, we are going to be able to expand more opportunities to reduce reliance on those contracts.
Great answers. Any questions?
I don't, I'm looking at the time.
Okay, we're looking at the time. Thank you so much for your presentation, and we'll move on to the next part of our agenda.
All right, thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Madam Secretary. And now we're going to move on to the Department of Labor. So Commissioner Virk and Assistant Commissioner Williamson, and any other staff people that you're bringing up with you. And we're going to hear about heat standards implementation for state workers, Davis-Martinez Act implementation for state workers, and staffing for wage and labor standard enforcement. So you all can just start however you want to start.
Good afternoon.
You should, that one should work too. If you both want one, there should be both of them, but it's up to you, whatever you want to.
It's a bit of a
Doesn't-
long
doesn't
carry.
move, okay.
Here, I can move.
Good afternoon. I'm Devki Virk, Commissioner of the Division of Labor and Industry within the Maryland Department of Labor. Within our docket are the state's worker protection programs, including Maryland Occupational Safety and Health, as well as our wage and labor standards programs, including overtime, minimum wage, child labor, monitoring and enforcement on our state-funded construction projects and contracts, as well as a number of other things. But I'm focusing here on those two areas of the division because those are the two that this committee is asked about. We are grateful for the opportunity to appear before you and share with you some of the highlights from our activities, particularly on the MOSH side on heat and on the implementation of the Davis-Martinez Act that the General Assembly passed early in 2025. I have with me Assistant Commissioner of Maryland Occupational Safety and Health, Chris Williamson, who's going to speak to those first two issues, and then turn it back over to me for wage staffing, which I believe was the third issue that the committee was interested in. And I do want to leave enough time to have a conversation about that. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you, Commissioner. And, I'll just say both of these two topics, I started in April, and the implementation parts of both of these were, already in the process, or we were thinking about them, and I had to just jump straight in and get up to speed on them. And they were both topics that, interested me in wanting to have this position, this opportunity to, to make an impact on Maryland workers. So, starting with heat, one of the things I just want to start out by acknowledging is just, the appreciation for the 2020 law that Chair Charkoudian sponsored and championed that, recognized that, heat stress is a big issue for workers, and that, Maryland workers deserved protection from that. So I want to start out by, acknowledging that and, talking a little bit. This was, MOSH's first real heat season. The standard took effect last year. Well, actually, we're in 2026. In late 2024, the heat standard took effect. But, it was really last year was the first heat season. And when I say heat season, I'm talking really from April to October. And, there are indoor places that, are covered by the standard that are hot all year round, but that's where we saw, and, as would be expected, there was most of the activity. And, while MOSH has a pretty broad mandate and, covers occupational safety and health for both public and private sector workers for the entire state, even before I came in, and then I very quickly saw this firsthand when I came on board, we used, we're a pretty small agency, and we used, all the resources we had to try to reach out and engage in pretty active outreach and education and awareness, knowing that, that was a big part of what was going to be the successful implementation of, having a heat standard and using it to protect workers. So I want to walk through a little bit of that, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the, what we saw from the enforcement piece of it. But, we engaged in pretty robust efforts, as I was talking about. Provided in-person and online presentations to 2,358 participants. One of the things we did, recognizing that a key part of implementing and having this law, protect as many workers as we could, is reaching out and doing education and awareness with workers, because they play a key role in all this. And one of the things we did, and it was a first trial for the for labor and industry within MOSH, we dabbled a little bit in a social media campaign and that was bilingual, both in English and Spanish. And we learned a little bit from that. And we also used the department's social media to raise and get information out there. And one of the interesting things when we were preparing for this and looking at our own information, that during that heat season that I was talking about, complaints that we got from employees, about half of them that were serious, we call them formal complaints, but basically they're serious hazards that employees are reaching out to us about. About half of those were heat related from April to October. So, I'd like to think that some of our efforts, bore some fruit there in terms of, workers knowing about it, and really becoming engaged. And that's an important part of, protecting workers, is them knowing that they do have these protections. They're the only workers on the East Coast that have these protections. And, that there are things that they can do within the workplace to try to identify and address hazards. But there's also an agency out there that they can contact if, if they need help or there's a serious hazard. As noted on here, we also did outreach, given the jurisdiction of this committee, with, our state partners and to cover, make sure that, public sector employers knew about the heat standard and, doing the things that, they should be doing to comply with and educate and make them aware of it too. So there we go. These are just a few of the key sectors that, we really focused on. I mean, it had a pretty diverse group of employees, labor unions, key employer groups, trade associations. Some of this had gone on before I came on board, and certainly I, saw a lot of it. And we put webinars on our website that are there that anybody can go see, that we're sector focused on recognizing that there are certain sectors that have unique heat hazards that, to give, the best sort of technical and advice that we could give of how to comply. But, even broader than that, how do you really protect your workers from this hazard that can cause heat stress and heat illness? One of the things we did too is, made sure that our inspectors were talking about this with employees and employers as they were going out and doing inspections during this key time. So they were key messengers for all that too. And really, making the most of the resources we had. One of the things we did was we had some information about from 2024 that we got from federal OSHA that some larger employers that had to submit occupational injury and illness information that's publicly available, they identified that for us. And there were about 17 employers that had potential recordable heat-related injuries and illnesses from the previous year. So we took the opportunity to send them specific information about, just so you know, Maryland has its own standard. Here's information about the standard. Go to our website. Took it as an opportunity to be proactive and send them compliance assistance, since we knew, had information that they had actually had a recordable injury or illness at their work site the previous year. So wanted to make sure they knew about the standard and knew ways that they could, improve their compliance and better protect their workers. Interestingly enough, we also partnered with Lamar Advertising and created a billboard. And so they had electronic billboards all throughout the state that when they didn't have basically paid space to fill it, they would put our ad up for us. And I think one of them, I suspect there wasn't a lot in Reisterstown or other places that they did this for us as a public service. And we thought that was a good thing to do and worthwhile. Interestingly enough, you saw it?
I saw it, yeah.
Good, that's great. I've wondered about that, so you've now answered that for me. I appreciate that. One of the things too is, talking about our website and continue doing this, as robust as we could. Outreach is having a separate MOSH webpage just for heat, where we put all this information, including, an actual template that employers can use to develop their own plans. Key requirement guides in both English and Spanish. But interestingly enough, that webpage is now, other than MOSH's main website, is by far and away our most popular, most visited site. So that tells us that, a lot of folks are going there and taking advantage of those resources that are available. And, workers are obviously better off because of that. So here's some enforcement statistics. And I want to just say really quickly too, like our colleagues from the other departments, that a lot of, in this era where my entire career has been in public service, public servants usually don't get the recognition that they deserve for the work that they do. And we have a lot of staff who worked hard on the development of this rule, the implementation of the rule, and the enforcement of it. And, I want to recognize them, because without their work, workers are not as well protected from heat stress and other potential hazards. And for my money, they do a great job and are worthy of that recognition. So, I think another thing that's really important to sort of, as we look at the numbers here and kind of think about them, is that, this is enforcement under a specific standard. Whereas before, it's not that workers didn't have protections from heat, but that was under what's known as the general duty clause. And if you compare or think about like how many actual employers that MOSH had historically cited under the general duty clause for heat versus, this activity that's just one heat season, this is by far and away illustrates, and not that there's not a lot more work to be done and that MOSH's work always goes on, but this is a lot more activity than had gone on ever before in MOSH's history. And, I think workers are better off for it. And, we want everybody to be in compliance, and we want, hopefully those numbers actually go down, but we're going to continue to work with everybody and continue to enforce the standard. And, but it just, I think, illustrates the importance of actually having a separate standard, that the things that you can do with it. And so there were 70 inspections that resulted in issuance of heat violations. We broke out the public sector ones there. And, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's really interesting that half of the formal complaints that we received during that season were heat related. And those all led to inspections and, drove a lot of this enforcement activity, were originated from complaints from workers or worker representatives. So just to transition to Davis Martinez.
Sorry, before you do that, I think we were just going to see if there were questions in
Okay.
each section, if
Yeah,
that's okay,
yeah,
just so we don't lose track of our.
However you all would like to handle
So
it. This is,
before, I have a question, but does our member know? Okay, I was going to ask. So I'm just, so half of all of your complaints, or just about half, were heat. And I'm just curious, obviously I believe in the need for an explicit heat standard, which is why I've been pushing for that. Do you have a sense of what under the generalized standard you were getting that were related to heat before there was an explicit standard in the past?
I don't have the specific numbers on how many complaints that we were getting from employees. I mean, I think employees, we obviously got some. What I can say, though, is I asked folks to go back and pull some information about how many like general duty clause citations we had issued that were heat related, and there were like 4.
Yeah.
So, we're talking about 70 inspections, and just to refine one piece a little bit, just because, you can get really in the weeds on our things and how you look at it, and it gives me an opportunity to share a little bit more information about the work we did. So there's sort of like, there's 3 buckets of how we would respond to or triage the complaints as they come in. And those were the serious ones. Those were the ones where the information we got led to us actually having somebody go out and do an on-site inspection. And then there's some that we would get that are not a serious, potential hazard, and we would follow up with. So we took action in those cases where you'd ask the employer to, get back to us on, do an evaluation and get back to us on some information. And then there were a number of others where, we would get a complaint, it didn't rise to that level, and we proactively shared compliance assistance, what we called heat letters, to those employers, just make sure that they knew about the standard and had that information. So we did all 3 of those things. So the specific one that I was talking about were the serious ones, which obviously are the ones that we responded to, and half of the total that we received during that period were heat related. And so I think that, illustrates that, as I was saying, that I think more workers knew that these protections were out there and actually speaking up and reaching out to us, and we would go look into it. And that, as is the case with, some of our enforcement activities, are complaint driven.
I have tracking time because we're, let me just ask one question, which may be bigger, but I just want to sort of put it out there right now. As we're looking at sort of this day-long hearing from different agencies and the intersection between, the workers' comp and staffing, and the intersection between the budget and the staffing, and then, we just heard from Secretary Scruggs about her concerns about some of the physical buildings that they're operating in and the need for DGS to engage with that. And in my mind, I assume that I don't know which, where the citations went to, but if you're in a building that doesn't have, functional air conditioning, the compliance for a heat standard requires, potentially in the public sector, right, a DGS intervention of some sort. And I'm just wondering if there is any space, and you don't necessarily need to be the person to answer this because I know this is like your specific division, but I just want to sort of put this out to, wherever we might be thinking about these things, there's space for this intersection of the conversation where, if we're committed to heat safety, for our employees and our, clients, like whether it's hospital or incarcerated individuals or whatever it might be, and then where there's an intersection in the conversation between that and the, the physical plants where, people are, living in, working in. So it's more of a thought, but if you want to respond to it, because it does feel like the prevention really ultimately in the public sector, a lot of the prevention is related to the physical buildings that people have to work in, right? Yeah, and I actually think I could probably take that and segue into the Davis-Martinez discussion if that works. And so I think just to even take a step broader back than that, right, is that if you look at the occupational safety and health, which is our lane, right, and we have the responsibility for public sector workers, protecting public sector workers in the state. If you look at the underlying MOSH Act, and certainly if you look at the Davis-Martinez legislation, right, there's a real intent, and there's language in there that guides all of us in what we're supposed to be doing, right, in terms of prioritizing workers' safety and health and that they are protected in the workplace. So I think starting from that broad sort of principle, it lays out
the obligations that all of us have is, MOSH is also a public sector employer too. We had to put together our own heat plan that protects our own employees and make sure they have water and everything, right? So, we have all these underlying obligations and responsibilities to our employees. And part of that, there's the intersections, as you said, of all those different things, but you have that underlying obligation. And then, last year, you all would have stepped further and included language, that was in the Davis-Martinez Act that said that public sector should be leaders in this space and on all these different things, right? So if we start from that as the basic premise, then, that has to be, I think, at least part of the calculus in balancing all these things is that, there's already existing statutes and laws that guide us in sort of setting priorities and thinking about it. And, occupational safety and health, making sure employees go home safe and healthy at the end of the day has to be part of that discussion and is important. That's just sort of my thinking about it, but certainly the law says that too, right? Like that's an important thing for people, but the law says that too. And so, heat being a physical space, right? Like there's different things in the heat standard and different triggers, and not to get too in the weeds on it, right? But if things are at a certain heat index, certain protections kick into place, and then as it goes up, you're more protected. But if you're in an environment where there is, central air or HVAC, you shouldn't be having those issues. And certainly you have situations where there are maintenance issues and things go down, and that's where you have to work together to make sure that you're devoting focus and resources to, in our world, that would be called abating the hazard, right? Like there's a potential hazard there, and we would work with our partners to make sure that things get abated, because that's really as much as penalties are important and there's other different things in enforcement. Abating hazards is really the crux of the work that MOSH does, and the real most important part of, enforcing, the statutes that we're responsible for enforcing, because it takes the hazards out of the workplace. So that's probably about all I really want to say on that point. But, it gets into, like I said, the Davis-Martinez and what, the crux of it. And so, similarly, that act put some new requirements, and MOSH has been really busy implementing our piece of it. But even before that act, as I was saying, public sector employers and bodies had this responsibility already. And, there's some things that are in this law that, I think it's fair to say that, they may have to take those a little bit more serious now, because there's potential for civil monetary penalties, but also there's different reporting requirements and things in there too of sharing information about compliance that will go through there. But, they already had that. So hopefully, and one of the things, like I was saying with heat, is we've done a lot of work to reach out and, and going to continue to do that to make sure that people are aware of the law and what the obligations are. And yes, the penalty thing is real and is, that you now may be subject to a civil monetary penalty. These are a few of the things that we're doing. And one of the things we did was there was a 1976 instruction that was in place that we got rid of that had that exemption to be consistent with, the statute's requirements. We're updating injury and illness obligations through rulemaking. We continue to do webinars and reach out about that and others. We have our public employee safety and health unit. We're in the process of trying to get a supervisor hired for that position. And, I think it's very important to note, though, that we didn't get any pens or any resources for that law. And we actually took an existing one and used it to create this supervisor position that is going to oversee MOSH's public sector work. So we're going through the process and, hoping to get that person onboarded. So the posting closed in December. So we're going through the process now to try to get that person in place. Another thing that's in the act that we're working hard on, and this little bit of a timeline, is the development of a workplace violence standard. And so that's a little bit, and as you can see, we're at the research and that part right now, and, hope to begin the public engagement part of it, certainly in this year and soon. And we will, as consistent with the law, but also just, what makes sense and the best practice is to have public hearings and try to get as much, diverse input, including from certified exclusive representatives of public body employees, to do that. So that's a little bit on that piece. And, the last thing I'll just say real quickly and then wrap up, because the commissioner has some important things she definitely wants to share with you all as well, is just to remind that we have this consultation program that not only helps on the private sector side for small businesses, but it's also available to all public bodies. And we have been encouraging all public bodies to take advantage of that. It's free, it's confidential. It's really good proactive risk management, and it's a way to get out ahead of, if you're concerned about penalties or, making sure that your workplace is safe and healthy for your public sector employees. We have experts that, would love to come out and work with them outside of the enforcement world. So.
I'm just going to ask one follow-up question on that. Related to that, which is a question that I've had, which is about the MOSH Advisory Board. Is that currently active? I think there's vacancies. What's the plan to make it a useful board to support the efforts of occupational safety in the state?
Sure, and I appreciate the question. Yeah, I mean, there's as the last I asked about it, or last updated, there's one person that's sort of been a carryover position, but there's not a number of vacancies or anything. But we are going to be engaging with the board on the workplace violence standard. Not just because we're required by the act to do that, but that's because, it makes sense, to your point, right, to engage, and that's part of the process that's going to help us develop the best standard that we can develop. And, it only makes sense to tap into those resources and to get that input from that body.
Thank you. Does anyone else have questions on the workplace? You good? All right, Commissioner Burke.
Thank you again for having us. I'm going to segue, and I guess I can ask Chris to keep running the slideshow for us if he could. I'm going to hit kind of at a very high level on our wage and labor standards enforcement programs. I understand that the question that the committee posed to us, sort of what is the adequacy of your staffing levels to enforce Maryland wage and hour laws, and that is a complicated question. Effective enforcement has so many layers to it, right? It's the scope of what you have to do and your obligations, the processes that you use to do those things, the tools that you have to do the work, what your authorities are and how you can exercise them, and what the conditions are on those authorities, and of course, the number of people that you have at various levels, to actually do the investigations and handle the complaints and process, all of the evidence that we would gather in connection with wage and hour enforcement. So it's a multi-layered question. I'm not going to attempt to deal with all of it, but I do want to try to touch on each one of those pieces. And I think it's helpful to set the stage by just talking about sort of like how many workers are we talking about in Maryland that we protect? How many employers do we have to regulate? So I pulled, and I've put the sources on here, I've pulled some information that I think will be helpful just in level setting here. The total number of workers, at least according to BLS's 2025 data, is 3.1 million workers. Now that's public and private sector. Our laws in the wage side, unlike MOSH, don't universally cover public sector employees, but certainly some of them do. So that's just, again, kind of writ large, the total number of workers. I pulled out the total number of workers in construction and in landscaping, partly because the Workplace Fraud Act, which is a focus of our investigative work, covers those two industries currently. So you'll see there that the total is about, overall about 180,000 or so if you add construction and landscaping workers together. Again, the source being BLS. I would also add that with respect to construction and landscaping, those sites are, with the exception of large construction projects, they're often mobile. There's often a small number of people who work at each one of those sites. So those are also additional challenges in terms of regulating. The total number of businesses in Maryland, at least according to, I believe it's Commerce who collects these numbers, is about 250,000, a little under. Again, all of those may not be employers. All of those are certainly not large employers. But again, the more small employers you have, the more fragmented and difficult enforcement and uniform enforcement can be. So I put that number out there just as a benchmark in terms of the number of potentially regulated entities that we are dealing with. The last two numbers here are kind of more specific to the work we do. It's the total number of prevailing wage projects that we're submitting payroll for work performed in FY25. And then the total number of workers who were reported on those payroll records. Under our prevailing wage law, which applies certain state minimum rates to construction that it receives a certain proportion of state funding, all of those contractors are supposed to be submitting certified, meaning under oath, payroll records through a system that our prevailing wage unit maintains in conjunction with our department's IT arm. And those numbers are interesting as well. The total number of projects reporting payroll during the year was 887, and the total number of workers reported on those records is 31,304. I would note, I didn't put all of the numbers on here, but the trend is up in terms of the number of projects that are reporting payroll. I just looked at a couple of years previous, and 887 is a climb from the previous year, and the year before that was a climb from the year before that, and the number of workers similarly tracks. I would pause here to say that 887 projects encompasses a lot of different things. It could be a roofing project at a particular high school, or an HVAC project, modernization project at a particular elementary school, or it could be a massive project, that state highway is undertaking. So there's a huge range in that 887. But I would just urge the committee to note that 887 projects means often in these projects, multiple employers on each project, because you'll have often a general contractor or a master, construction manager, and then you'll have many subs and, primes and then subs underneath them, second tier, third tier, et cetera. So one project can have, particularly if it's a large project, we have seen projects with over 100 contractors who are actually performing work on the site that would be covered by a prevailing wage. So just to give you a sense of scope. Could we go to the next slide, please? I'll also say that our wage and labor standards unit, our whole team, their responsibilities involve enforcing, probably more than 20 distinct laws, from everything from minimum wage and child labor and overtime to the pay stub law that the General Assembly passed 2 years ago, the equal pay and wage transparency laws that were also updated 2 years ago, sick and safe leave law that was, certainly the precursor to family, parental leave, workplace fraud, plus prevailing wage. So we're talking about a big range of responsibilities. And again, I say that only to set the stage to say it's a lot of people, it's a lot of responsibilities. And, I think as the 3 next slides will show, our staff are really punching above their weight here pretty significantly. So this is just a thumbnail here on prevailing wage of, what we've been able to do. The first 3 numbers represent, 3 years basically prior to my coming into the division. FY '24 is kind of the first full year that I was there, and new leadership was placed over all of the wage and labor standards enforcement programs. And you can see, again, I'm not going to attribute it to any one specific factor, but there is an astronomical difference, right, between really any of the previous 3 years and FY '24. In FY '25, we're about even. You know, again, I haven't gone back to drill into exactly why that is. Some of it is just maybe happenstance. I know we have a number of, and had a number of larger cases that we were initiating during that fiscal year that have sort of now come to fruition in FY '26. As you can see in the first 2 quarters of FY '26, we have recovered, and this is money in workers' pockets, restitution in workers' pockets. We have recovered almost $800,000 in, you know, the first 2 quarters of the year. You know, if we could remain on that track, we're talking about, you know, a pretty substantial leap even from FY '24, and certainly like all of the previous years combined. And we've done all that really with an authorized strength of 13, you know, field staff, plus 2 supervisors, one of whom is acting, who we are crossing our fingers that we are allowed to have a second full-time supervisor, and 1 administrative aide. I mean, we've increased bilingual capacity, we've added Spanish-speaking investigators and administrative staff. You know, those things have made a difference. Again, I'm not going to say any one factor is necessarily dispositive, but certainly those are significant. And you'll see this trend through our next slides as well. Workplace fraud, similarly, I kind of drill down a little bit farther into the numbers here. You know, number of site visits, I've given you some, you know, a sense of what that's looking like. You know, I'll pause to say that the 3 years before I got here, there was basically not enforcement of the Workplace Fraud Act. When, you know, I came in and we saw that, again, new wage leadership, a new supervisor on an acting basis over the workplace fraud unit, and working closely with our assistant attorney generals, we rebuilt that unit from the ground up. We are nowhere near done, but we at least got it walking, you know what I mean? And, you know, we've seen some success here in terms of not really the number of citations. I would say it's the number of workers that we've identified, right, as being misclassified, which to me is kind of the core piece of the work. You know, 1 citation can cover 3 workers, or it can cover, you know, and I think currently we have a significant case with like 40 workers, all of whom, you know, we've, I think, identified as being misclassified workers. So that number is a key number that we're looking at. And I think the other really key number is the referral to sister agencies, because, you know, the Joint Enforcement Task Force on Workplace Fraud was set up to bring all of the agencies that have a stake in this, everyone from the comptroller who collects the taxes or doesn't collect the taxes in the case of misclassified workers, to workers' comp, you know, to MIA, the insurance administration, you know, who addresses premiums in workers' comp. Misclassification affects all of those agencies, right? Not just labor, not just the Attorney General's office, not just, you know, not just unemployment. It's all of them. So the task force really brings them together, and our wage leadership has been extremely active in bringing particularly the enforcers at each one of those agencies together on the regular to share information, to cross-pollinate our strategies, and just basically to refer cases. We found this case, these folks called in, we have found merit on the wage side. What can you find, comptroller? What could you find, unemployment? And that has really been a significant piece. You'll see those numbers have shot up over the last several years, and we expect that to continue. I would also pause to say, and I'm sorry, I know I should sort of try to wind it up, but I'm excited about it. We're trying to do cross-referrals within our division. So when our workplace fraud investigators go out, if someone's being misclassified, they're probably not getting sick and safe leave. So we are trying to train our investigators to like issue spot those things. They're probably not getting a pay stub. that's another violation, right? So being able to see a holistic picture of what all those violations could be is part of what we're trying to prioritize. And part of what is, again, I think one of the geniuses of having all of those programs under one umbrella is that ability for people to cross-cut. Let's move to the next piece. You'll see it's similar bilingual staff capacity and increased staffing, of course, from the General Assembly, particularly to workplace fraud, that has brought us some success there. Wage and hour violations, the trend is the same. I'm not going to really dwell on it, except to say one of the things we're trying to do here that I want to just highlight is that we're trying, amongst all the other things, we're trying to actually do the work differently. So you'll see the line that says wage audits. In the past, I think when we got a complaint from someone saying, I wasn't paid overtime, am I owed overtime for this? And we determined that they did. We addressed that issue for that one worker in that one workplace. We're not doing that anymore. If we get an overtime violation for one worker, we're going to look at all of them. If we see a minimum wage violation for one worker, we're going to look at the whole thing, right? It's just about getting holistic relief and holistic compliance. All right, so all of this is really nice and trending in the right direction, but I think, to me, what it shows is that there are multiple factors in the success, and it's not only about how many staff you have. It's about everything from our wage leadership team, the commitment of our staff to the work, the processes we use, and the tools that we have to do the work. Because if the better tools we have, right, the sharper knife you have, the more, skillfully you can chop. Similarly here, the better tools we have, the more effectively we can use our investigators to do the work. Because we are never going to have enough investigators to have, some reasonable ratio of investigators, number of employers per investigator or number of employees per investigator. When you're talking 3.1 million workers in the state and, hundreds of thousands of businesses, we could have 35 investigators or we could have 55 investigators, and that ratio would still be off. So where we are trying to focus is on the process and, again, on the tools. And that is something I think we have, our bill has actually been filed, so I can talk about it. The bill that the division is bringing this year really focuses on sharpening those tools, expanding the tools in the toolbox and sharpening the tools that we have, including a number of things that we have seen work in other jurisdictions, including general contractor liability for workplace fraud, including strengthened consequences on debarment and licensing for workplace fraud violations and for some of our repeat violators, and then increased collaboration, both in terms of our sister agencies and the Attorney General's office in particular. So I'll stop there. I apologize. I know we've got a limited amount of time, but we're excited about the work we're doing. I guess that's the bottom line. And there are, many aspects to it that we are trying to pursue.
Well, as you know, I personally care very deeply about this part of the work that you do. So let me just start by saying thank you very much and congratulations, because the numbers really show what your leadership has done in the agency. And so thank you for that. And as you've said, there's obviously a lot more work to be done. The question we've been asking folks is about what is it that we should be keeping an eye on in the session to support the efforts. I think you answered that question. And because of time, I'm not going to ask the 15 other questions I might have asked, but I will follow up with you directly for that. We do want to make sure that before 3:30 we have a chance to hear from our AFSCME representatives who are here as well. So just close by thanking you both. And if you have additional information you want to provide to the committee, please do so, and we may follow up with additional questions.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, as mentioned, our last panel today is from the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. And I'd like to invite up Christian Goebel, Tony Sines, Renika Robinson, Denise Henderson Johnson, and is it Michael or Michelle Warble? Michelle. Great. Thank you so much. So if you don't mind, before you start, just, before you speak, if you could each introduce yourself for the record, that would be fabulous. And we're sorry for the time crunch.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair Hester. If we'd like to begin with President Signs.
Good afternoon, Chair Hester and Chair Chardorian, and members of the committee. My name is Tony Signs. I'm a correctional supply officer at Western Correctional Institution, and I serve as the president of ASME Local 898, which represents correctional officers in Western Correctional Institution. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. We are currently facing many challenges in DPSCS. The union and the department are to conduct a post-by-post staffing analysis every 2 years. This process for this year is still not complete, as the contractor conducted audits at ECI and MCIW without the union. To date, the department has not released any of those reports for ASME to review or negotiate. There are many challenges when correctional officers are short-staffed. It has an impact on the incarcerated individuals, eliminating all out-of-cell activities, from recreation schools, shops, religious study groups, self-help groups. The lack of stimulation or things to look forward to only furthers the tension and problems in these facilities. Mandatory overtime and collapsed posts inside these facilities continue to create safety hazards and assaults on staff and IIs. North Branch and Western Correctional Facility have modified operations to cut down on mandatory overtime, but this has not helped. Staff are being forced to work 7 days a week, along with several mandatory double shifts in that week, leading to burnout and attrition. We have had 13 inmate deaths in 2025 and 1 in 2026 so far this year. This is due to the lack of direct supervision because of the staffing shortage. Serious incident reports continue to climb, anything from II to II assaults, II on staff assaults. Furthermore, the facility closures are only going to put more strain on existing staff at other facilities. Correctional officers need improved compensation to attract new staff into the career field while also retaining senior staff. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'm Rainika Robinson, president of ASME Local 3661, representing Community Corrections, and I'm a parole and probation agent. While hiring is happening, the data shows we are not retaining staff. In January of 25, we had 639 agents. By August, that did increase to 651, but as of December 12th, staffing dropped to 646 agents. We saw the same pattern with our drinking and driving monitors. The agency's HR loses paperwork, ignores phone calls, and we've even had former agents seeking reinstatement that were never contacted by human resources. Staffing losses increase caseload sizes, which affect supervision outcomes and staff safety. We've tried to work collaboratively on caseload study, but progress has stalled. In September, we had to file a grievance just to restart the caseload study subcommittee. We won that grievance, but this committee still hasn't reconvened. The University of Baltimore found that DPP needs more administrative support staff to reduce agent workloads. And the American Correctional Association report confirms what staff have been saying: high caseload, leadership challenges, and safety concerns. Step one towards a solution is attracting and retaining employees. I live in a household with 3 state employees. We don't live together by choice, but because we can't afford to live independently. When wages aren't competitive and we don't keep up with the cost of living, we don't attract and retain talent. We desperately need your support for wage increases that not only help us hire, but retain employees.
Thank you. I think I'm good. Good afternoon, Chair Hester, Chair Charkudian, and members of the committee. My name is Denise Henderson Johnson. I am a youth transportation officer with DJS at the Baltimore City Juvenile Justice Center, and I serve as the proud president of ASME Local 3167, which represents staff at DJS. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. We are tasked with providing a safe environment while youth are in the community and detention. Without the correct number of staff, this cannot happen and creates a safety issue for staff and youth. Operations are also affected. We develop plant issues such as the ones reported in the ombudsman's report, and also issues I have personally reported to OSHA, such as sewage coming up through the vents in the living units, and staff and youth being told to clean up the mess. And finally, programming. You can develop the most impactful programming that you can, but if you don't have the experienced staff to implement it, it means nothing. Our case managers have caseloads that have tripled, meaning youth are not getting full access to the services they deserve. Our union has engaged with the agency to conduct a staffing analysis for personnel to identify appropriate caseloads for staff and determine the appropriate amount of people we need to do our jobs effectively and safely for the youth in our care. However, the agency has not worked with us on a staffing analysis. The case managers are tired, burned out, but continue to serve the youth the best as they can. I was told during a report, DJS hired 12 new employees. Out of 12, 11 resigned. You have to offer a living wage. We are tasked with serving the most vulnerable youth in Maryland. How can we do that if we are worrying about if we can afford medications and groceries? I am asking, no, at this point I am begging, please assist us in recruiting and retaining qualified and dedicated staff. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Michelle Warble, and I've been a negotiator with AFSCME Maryland since May of 2025. Prior to this, I was working as a wage and hour investigator at MDOL, so I have firsthand experience with this work. Our wage and hour units ensure that workers are paid what they're legally owed and compensated as employees, even when employers try to pass them off as independent contractors. We process complaints related to wage theft, conduct employer payroll audits, recover unpaid wages, and enforce compliance with a wide variety of Maryland labor laws. For many workers, particularly low-wage and vulnerable workers, our unit is the only protection that they have against wage theft. Effective enforcement also ensures that responsible employers are not being undercut by those who break the law. Today, our unit is significantly understaffed. At least 10 wage and hour investigators have left Maryland Department of Labor since April of 2025, and none have been replaced. By my count, 12 authorized positions remain vacant, and the existing staff of 23 investigators are covering the entire state. The work is complex and it's time intensive. A thorough investigation includes interviews, a review and analysis of all relevant documentation that takes time to collect, and adherence to our legal timelines. Short staffing has serious consequences. Investigators carry excessive caseloads, cases take longer to resolve, and claimants wait months for relief, some years if it goes to collections. Limited staffing makes proactive enforcement next to impossible, forcing our unit to operate primarily in response to complaints. The solution is clear. Low compensation is not attracting applicants, and it is driving our experienced staff out, resulting in a loss of institutional knowledge. In addition, in July of 24, workers in this unit lost telework eligibility, eliminating an important recruitment and retention tool. Our investigators need a collaborative, supportive workplace where leadership values and respects our expertise, treats us as professionals that we are, and consistently recognizes the vital impact of our work protecting Maryland's workers. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Good afternoon, again, Chair Hester, Chair Charkoudian, Christian Goebel, Legislative and Political Coordinator with AFSCME Maryland Council 3. Just to touch on some topics that were discussed this afternoon and how they relate to the morning session. You know, when we were starting here today in the afternoon hearing about DPSCS and the vacancy rates, it is absolutely unacceptable to our union that our department in our state is assuming a vacancy rate of 12%. We were talking this morning about how we are spending $220 million on overtime within DPSCS alone. We talked about how correctional officer twos are accounting for about 40% of all of our state's overtime. We cannot continue to operate this way. This is unacceptable for our members, for the safety of incarcerated individuals who are in our institutions, for the safety of our staff. You know, President Sines was speaking before about the staffing analysis work and why this is so incredibly important. It's a statutory obligation that the department engages in good faith with our union on staffing analysis work. Again, the department reported in their strategic overtime report that was submitted to the budget committees on November 1st of 2025, that Creative Corrections had completed the facilities assessment by October 31st of 2025, that they expected to receive the report from Creative Corrections by the end of November 2025, and yet to date, the union has had no engagement with that report. That is something that is incredibly frustrating and how important this is. And President Sines was also speaking about the safety issues that are persisting in our correctional institutions. 13 deaths last year of incarcerated individuals, 1 this year. Last year, it was well noted that in our correctional facilities that assaults on staff had more than doubled. We cannot continue to sustain these trends and expect that our institutions are going to be safe for the people that are housed there or for our staff. This is incredibly important for recruitment and retention to address these issues. Again, the closure of MCIJ that is occurring in June 30th of this year is also going to be impactful. And we want to know whether the staffing analysis work that was completed earlier this year by the consultant is going to take into account how the closure of MCIJ in the central region is going to impact staffing in our Western institutions. You know, there are going to be incarcerated individuals who are going to be sent in various facilities, and we need to know what that impact is going to look like. With regard to DJS, it is great to hear. We appreciate the acting secretary acquiring those additional positions, particularly in residential services, and for reallocating those positions that had previously been taken away. But again, our union wants engagement on staffing analysis. We appreciate the intention, the intentionality, and the motivation to this, but we would like greater engagement. If I may, circling back real quick to DPSCS, really briefly, again, the American Correctional Association report on DPP was incredibly troubling for our members in DPP. It highlighted a series of issues that exist with staff morale based on a variety of issues. Challenges with leadership, communication, low compensation that is consistently reported among our membership. And again, these are members who are in high-risk situations. We literally had the Davis-Martinez Public Employee Safety and Health Act passed year after the death of Agent Martinez, who was a parole and probation agent with Local 3661. Finally, I'll just touch on MDOL real quick. We are excited about the continued work on the implementation of that act and the Workplace Violence Prevention Standard. Our legislation was accomplished that year because of the tireless advocacy of all of our local leaders who are here and all of our members across the state of Maryland. We will have the 3rd Workplace Violence Prevention Standard in the country that will comprehensively cover the entire public sector, and we are incredibly excited to see that implemented this session. We want to see, obviously, more staffing addressed for wage and hour issues that Michelle was speaking to, and we look forward to this work to continue. Thank you all for the opportunity to testify again this afternoon. It is incredibly important for all of our members to see increased compensation for our state employees, and we are going to be fighting for that this session. They have absolutely earned everything that they deserve. So thank you.
Well, thank you all for your service to the people of Maryland and for your advocacy for your colleagues across the state, and appreciate you taking the time today to come and provide this perspective to us as well. And we look forward to hearing from you throughout the session. I think the question I've been asking is there something you want to put on our radar for the session? I think you to some extent did, but if there's anything else that you want to make sure is on our radar as we're starting the session that you think addresses some of these issues, you know, please feel free to share in just a few minutes.
Sure. I'll say briefly again to echo and reiterate what all of our members have spoken about is the need for increased compensation. It is directly tied to safety issues for our members who are particularly staffing our 24/7 facilities. This is an incredibly important issue. Our state employees are undercompensated. Their cost of living adjustments have fallen behind by 11% when measured against inflation. Our step increases have not been met half of the time for the last 10 years. It's an incredibly important issue for us to be attracting people into these hard-to-fill positions and to retaining veteran state employees. Again, county and federal employers are offering more competitive salaries, which has been affirmed by prior Department of Legislative Services reports. It's something that's incredibly important that we need to address. Again, we'll be fighting for binding interest arbitration. We also discussed that this morning's session. But also, as we talked about with DPS, CS, and DJS, we really need capital plans as well for our aging facilities that have an impact on the people that are in our state's care and for our staff as well. Operational and capital facility plans is incredibly important.
Thank you all very much. Do you have other questions or?
No, I just want to, end by, thanking you again for your service to the state and, the rise in the deaths and the, injuries and the assaults. It's just completely unacceptable. And we promise to work with you and to work with the agencies to do what we can this session to make it a better working environment for all of you. Thank you again for your comments today.
Thank you.
Thank you.